hypoxis. And to talk a bit around the idea of the hyparchic moment. I tried to show crudely in the gestural language at the very beginning this morning about like you separate out and then return again, but this returning, the re-entry, so to speak, into the same makes something, develops, something is made by this action. One of its features is to produce an envelope, a containment, a completeness, a wholeness, so that not only is there this one damn thing after another, everything going on and on, the going onness of something, there is something which stands in its own time and place. It's an event, we say. This was a real event, historical event, and all this kind of thing. So this was a crucial moment in my life. And it's, so to speak, as if time wraps around itself, encloses itself and holds something. There's a containment there. So that's the beginning of me talking about a hyparchic moment. It's really to doubly emphasize the moment. The moment is not in the sense of fleeting moment. It's the moment which is so strong that it remains. It doesn't disperse or fade away, but is always there. And I say there, and I make a gesture with my hands, refer you back to our early conversation about this, something more somewhere. It's there. And in this case, the there I'm pointing to is this third dimension which is connected very intimately with our own sense of purpose, intention, decision, and so on, under the rubric or the belief or the hope that this actually is real and makes a difference. At least it makes a difference to us. Now, if you can conjure up some sense of this kind of quality or this attribute of containment, of having a certain measure of completeness and wholeness, and also with this character, property of, I say, this re-entering into itself, because I'm making this gesture of circulation, it's rather like to invoke the concept of these possibilities are circulating through this particular moment in time. So it's not simply fixed as that action, which is irreversible and specific, but it's enriched by all these possibilities. Now, I'm groping after something here. I can only offer a few possible indicative illustrations, and I go back to movies. Yes. I always loved this remark by a man called Iksan. He was an Indonesian, and he was originally a guerrilla fighter in Indonesia, and he became converted by a spiritual leader called Pak Subu. And some people around Bennett met him, and he was very much loved and regarded. But people were puzzled about him. He said he was always going off to the movies, and they said, "You're a spiritual man, why do you go to the movies?" I said, well, for me, I'm the opposite. He must be a spiritual man because he goes to the movies. And they was like ticking off, how can you sink so low? And he said, but I see beyond the screen to the source. And you say, well, he was bullshitting, but maybe not. Because experimented with this a bit myself, and I was talking with Darlene about it yesterday or the day before. sometimes you watch a movie or listen to a piece of music, and you can see there's part of it seeing the mistakes, the crudeness, whatever, the faults, or whatever it is, the imperfections and so on. And you can get stuck on that. But another way in which you go further and you put yourself into it, and you begin to see, for example, the film as it should have been, listen to the music as it should have been. And you're not stuck to the actuality. Because actuality is only, as I hope to show, like that corner of the whole. Actuality can sometimes play a very modest part in a moment. But we have to know what is actual, be concrete and true to each dimension, true to its nature, not mix them up. So I've seen something like this, and one can experiment, I think, quite usefully in oneself about this, because it starts with a change and shift of attitude, and being used to shifting one's attitude I find very beneficial. I can do very little, but what little I can do I value a great deal. And it's this really of giving yourself into something and to help realize what it is. In that early phrase of T.S. Eliot, and the roses have the look of flowers that are looked at. You see, we think there are the flowers, there's this human being, light rays come from the flowers, hit the retina of the man. He says, there is flower. See, for me, this is so tediously and offensively boring. No, the roses have the look of flowers that we look at. See, this double sense always in something. That's an object, I'm looking at it. For me, I say, you lost the plot already. There is an object I'm looking at. There is a moment. It's a moment of engagement. All of you have tasted this, A simple thing, a sentimental thing, like looking at the flower, clouds, the sky, smelling the spring air, whatever it is, and you see, one time, it's for real. It's the real McCoy. What makes it the real McCoy, you see? And the poet Rilke, I should have brought some Rilke with me. And those of you who don't know him, he was an early Austrian poet of the 20th century. And his masterpiece is a poem called the Duino Elegies. And it's really discourse and feelings about the nature of angels and animals and men. Wonderful thing. And he was talking about the violin sound waiting to be heard. And it's complete, and it engages in my, sometimes, it must be quite vague mind, with a kind of scientific idea that when you look at a star, you and the star are one. Because technically in relativity there is a zero interval when your eyes open to a star and you say, well, this star sent its light out X million years ago, billion years ago. Now, in the actual interval is instantaneous, so your eyeball is right in that atom in the star. That sort of thing. But these are pictures which can help. So, how we get to think like a work of art is, particularly music because it's more temporal and reminds us more easily, is this moment. And you imagine all the times that the Goldberg variations have been performed, millions and millions of times, and each time, what is it? You say, is it just repetition? Just another actual attempt, another failed attempt to do it completely? Is there somewhere where it's refining itself? Again, this is a story I would have told before, so I apologize. I was very struck by Bennett's comments on the role of Mendelssohn. For a long time, music of Bach was neglected. John Sebastian Bach was treated as a minor Baroque composer. And then Mendelssohn took up his cause, and Mendelssohn put his own money in publishing the scores, getting performances done. And it's through Mendelssohn's perception of Bach that we now have the Bachs as we know. He recreated Bach. And what Mr. Bennett added to this, and you can take it as a quirk, if you like, was that he said, in all this time when it was largely unplayed, it was developing. It was not the same music. Well, this is crazy. You know? It's a score, you know, written down. You think, no, as a living experience. You know, when you, because in a way, when you listen to the Goldberg variations or whatever, or the popular things, the Brandenburg concertos and all the rest of it, you're also hearing millions of people hearing this piece of music, and everybody. You know, if you want to live and choose to live in a connected universe, then all these people who listen to this music are in the music. And this is my preference. You might say it's wishful thinking, but that's what I like to imagine. Now this, and there's something too mysteriously connected with it about, I mentioned all these millions of times, things which are repeated endlessly, like, you know, Miss Bennett was very keen on, also had a big influence on me on Greek drama, plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, which are now more than 2,000 years old. And it's performed, and see, when it's performed, what actually happens? This moment is there. And of course, it's speaking maybe a different language, they're dressed differently, there's got electric lights on it, which they wouldn't have had in ancient Greece. They're inside the theatre. It's, you know, and all the context and everything else is different. All the people are different, but it's the same. What makes it the same? And you really do see it. I remember seeing performances of Medea in New York 15 years ago, and just you're with the event of its creation. So this has, at least I would argue, a pragmatic aspect to it. Pragmatic being, you know, it gives oneself a role. One's not just a passive spectator in front of this, an incidental character in the plot. One is an essential part of the plot. So I really believe every time one listens to something with gratitude and appreciation, then it is enriched. And I do keep reflecting and say, well, this is maybe just wishful thinking, just imagination, just, it sounds nice, a kind of elevated bullshit. But on the other hand, I say, why not go for it? Life is more fun that way.
The reader, I'm going to get it all messed up, Jameson's literary theory that the voice is not the author's voice, that postmodern gives sounding to the reader as a view and a voice in changing the text. It subverts reality when you participate in it. Yes. Is that similar to?
Yes, yes, it is. It is points at least to it, you know, but it's a matter of engagement. Yeah. Because you imagine, if you treat it like just stuff or, you know, something in a book, you say something in a book, whatever it is, you know, the words of dead white men, or something. You know, this kind of stuff. You have the attitude, then you're cut off. You're cutting yourself off, you see, from the process. And if you put yourself in, then you're committing yourself to that. It's a kind of hope, you know. You can't say, is it so or is it not so? Well, in a sense, you choose to make it so, or otherwise. It's up to you. So, what Bennett did with this notion of hyparxis, just as a way of talking, he talked about the hyparchic past, the hyparchic present, and the hyparchic future. And this I found his most, sounds like more sci-fi aspects of his work, because it was, and when I first came across this idea of the hyparchic future, I thought, wow, because this was in a way a solution to a sort of epistemological problem, which is that if you want to believe in or find a way to understand, you know, things like angelic intelligences or higher intelligences and so on, again, as we talked about this morning, where are you going to put them? Because they're obviously not around. You can't ring them up. You know, or go down the road and find them where they hang out and that sort of thing. So again, not in some, of course, in some degree, you see, it still persists. You could do it more a century ago than you can now. What people did was put them into distant places, like the Himalayas. That's why the masters are in the Himalayas, because few people could get there. So it's very convenient. Or the magical city of Shambhala, which is in Central Asia, or some of the South American, caves, crystal caves with all deep knowledge in it, and all this kind of thing. You put it in a place, or even partially, a little bit, you put it in these sacred sites and into the landscape. You see, it's a way of putting it somewhere. Bennett's idea was forget about all this space, you put it in, which is a spatial word, in time, and in the future. You see, but not just any old future, but the hyparchic future. So his vision of the hyparchic future was to turn it into a high-quality workshop. Not, none of this hanging about twanging harps business, but what could be there? And there's the elements, which he eventually claimed, were like the engines of intelligence, which sometimes it's simply called creativity. I'm changing these ways of talking to encourage you to shift ways of talking and keep your attention centered. These produce this sort of more sculptural view or something. So there's various ways of talking I'm trying to change between. And you see, how can it be? If it's not like, you see, this is the puzzle, not like there's all worked out, or maybe, because we come back to it soon in terms of movies and so on, it's all worked out at that some kind of future, and we just have to catch up with it. No, but it's operating on us now. How can it operate on us now? It's through one poetic description of it is through a calling. It calls to us. Imagine you're wandering around the landscape and you hear this voice. Hello? Hello? And what you do is find where is it coming from, and you move towards it. But you have to respond to the call. The call doesn't say exactly what it is or what it's about or whatever, just a call. And that, don't you, all of you have a sense in your lives, you feel something is calling. Come on. Rather than pushing. It's more a pull than a push. So it's contributing. Why? Because it opened up new things. There's a problem. See, we can have a kind of productivity, kind of sort of originality, and sort of do things which might appear like works of art and so on, but they're really just more of the same. Kind of turning over something which now so really new, unexpected, like is implied but not restricted to something like the avant-garde in art. It's where something breaks through and people want music which is the kind never before heard. How would they get to this point? Because something calls them and they get this deep dissatisfaction. So there is in this also a completion of a cycle. I keep talking about this re-entry and re-entry. Let's see. You get to that. You see, the future is now in two senses. There's future time, but there's future in another sense. And where these two coincide, then you get the fulfillment. And it goes on to another story, another episode. So for the moment, that's all I can do is offer a sense of this hyparchic future as a place of industry. But he preferred the term talking about higher powers of demiurgic intelligence, and demiurge means really the worker, and sometimes translated as the worker for the people. And in Plato, the demiurge is the worker. It's not the ultimate divine intelligence, but the craftsman. And Bennett turned it around and said these craftsmen are crafting the future of mind. This is their work, is to develop make possible new kinds of mind. And which brings along the spectre, the problem of us poor chaps, who might get hold of an idea like this and say, I'll have some of that. But it ain't so easy, because that's why you get all this rhetoric about dying and sacrifice and all the rest of it, because it really usually does demand something like sacrifice, and it does relate to the whole history of sacrifice, and why there's been this long-standing problem which the Buddhists and also Buddhists in their own way said about the problem of sacrificing other animals, and what is inner sacrifice opposed to outer sacrifice, what's the meaning of the story of Abraham, and all of that is conjured up by the simple word of sacrifice, because it comes to where, how can you enable the new to enter, and with it comes this inevitably that sort of ambiguity. It's already done, in a sense, but you have to do it. It's done, why should I have to do it? Well, only you can answer. When you do it, then you know the answer, only by doing it. Now what is this, the hyparchic present, though? This is, I'm going to identify it with a phrase which is used very casually in the sort of tradition I'm associated with, and say, the hyparchic present is work on oneself. Is just treated like taking oneself in hand now, which you can only do now. And when you do this, it's like, for me, appears like that makes me a player in this hyparchic game. And then you can draw on the hyparchic past, and respond to the hyparchic future, and be a player in the game. That's the kind of thing. And what essentially is, well, not essentially, but as a pragmatic definition, is the notion of work on oneself. I want to leave it in a very simple sense, in that one is doing things anyway, but like that common phrase, once more with feeling. You're doing things, but are you really doing them? I'm not appealing to you to know in your life you do things, and sometimes you're really doing them, and other times that you just, by default, you're letting the robot do it. And you might do, and it's
but
like,
it does so many things so well.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? And in a sense, why bother to do it? You don't want to do it all the time, but why bother? And that all comes into this realm of choice. You have to choose something now. Only you do it for yourself in that sense. But you can take it like this. People do exercise, tasting food, first morsel of food, for example. But it gets turned into, I think, into a sort of alternative version of itself. So to some degree, the current fashion of mindfulness is a distortion of it, because it is this intimacy of doing authentically. As I say, it's not every moment, but that, for me, is your entry ticket into the game. And I don't know who keeps accounts, or the score, the tally, what this game is coming out to, but it does something. So time past and time future and time present, but in this other sense of the hyparchic, and each moment is evolving. I leave you with, well, I always leave you with this verbal definition from Bennett, which is very surprising, but I think is very effective. And I'll leave you, more or less, leave you with it. And he said he was very keen with progress, but not in the Victorian sense. It's really in the 19th century, which was possessed by the idea of progress, but a like postmodern sense of progress. He said progress is only within the present moment. And normally people think it's tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm going to get it together.
Never comes.
Pardon?
Tomorrow never comes.
And when then tomorrow never comes, you see, and there's mañana. But this other sense, it is, you see, it happens now, but now is now. But now, you see, is not an instant. It's not a millisecond. Anything seconds. Because its measure in terms of linear time is only one facet. There's these other facets which contribute to the, call it the temporal three-dimensional body of the moment, which can be made as rich as we can make it. So, progress is in the present moment, so you can at least imagine, going back to the music of Bach, created at a certain time, it's still in that time, but it's evolving in that time. You see, but in relationship to who? Well, that's just in relationship to me, my time. But these times are not, you see, just controlled by linear succession at all. They are hyparchically connected. So, I believe it was some vague idea. This is like the secret story woven in our lives and the rest of it. And now for something completely different, which is another reading.